Okay. Hello, everyone in attendance and online. Hi, however. Welcome to the Green Program Capstone presentations. For the past 6 days, our students from all over the world have been working on their final capstone projects, which are entrepreneurial solutions to issues in sustainable development. They've been traveling all over Iceland and learning about Iceland's applications of renewable energy and also sustainable development in general, and soil conservation and such. And they have been working on these solutions. It's no idea is too big for the capstone project. Feasibility is not a must, but they will be explaining whether their projects are feasible or not, and or what steps need to be made in order to make their ideas feasible. So again, I'll be giving you 15 minutes to present, and when you're at 10 minutes, I'll hold up 5 fingers for 5 minutes left, then 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, and then I'll give you wrapping up. Okay, so our first group is biodiversity and carbon sequestering in Iceland, correct? Yes? Cool. Awesome. Good luck. Oh, when you speak, hold the mic. Yeah, so pass it around to each other. Sound good?
Yeah.
Andres, does the audio sound good? Send me a text if it does. Cool.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is our capstone project on biodiversity and carbon sequestering in Iceland.
Hello, I'm Claudia Crane and I go to Penn State. I'm majoring in meteorology and minoring in GIS and environmental inquiry, and I'm from Chicago, Illinois.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kirsten Glaister. I'm majoring in geographic information systems. I go to the University of South Florida, and I'm from Tampa, Florida.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nora Britt. I go to Virginia Tech, and I am majoring in biology with a minor in environmental science, and I am from Charlotte, North Carolina. So, Ishkogur. This is the name of our company that we are proposing.
I have, one quick note. How whoever went first was holding the mic was perfect. How far away was it from your mic? Right here? Perfect.
Done.
Awesome.
Right here?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
a good spot. Thanks.
Got it. So Ishkogur basically means ice forest. And we named it that because when people first settled Iceland, they saw ice and they saw forests. And they talked a lot about how it was a very forested area. But it's interesting because you go outside and you do not see these forests. It's very barren, very tundra-esque environment. So what we are trying to do is bring back these forests because the lack of them, the lack of biodiversity, contributes a lot to the lack of carbon sequestration, which means that carbon emissions, they're not being converted into oxygen by plants, which means that there's a lot of carbon emissions coming from specifically power plants and other things here in Iceland. So what we are trying to do is clean up this energy and kind of restore the natural beauty that Iceland once possessed. And these are our table of contents. We're going to start out with the golden circle, move on to the business model, sustainability complex, sustainability goals, and the challenges in our project. It's a golden circle.
So first, starting off with why our organization wants to do this. It's because, as Nora touched on earlier, the biodiversity in Iceland is lacking a lot, and this is causing a buildup of CO2 in the atmosphere, and that's contributing a lot to global warming, especially in Iceland and around the world. How are we going to do this? We're going to introduce beneficial plant life to Iceland and also partner with some of the existing energy companies here in the country. And what our company is going to be doing, we're going to be contributing to carbon sequestration and improving biodiversity in the country. And like I said, also helping energy companies reach some of their sustainability goals. So that could be things like carbon credits potentially in the future, carbon tax, stuff like that.
Okay, so moving into the business model, our first key resource is the people, which is very important to us because we need agriculturalists to help with farming, ecologists to help with understanding how the plants will interact with the unique environment of Iceland, and we are also going to need engineers to help with tools and equipment. For our second resource, we will need funding because we are a nonprofit organization, so this will be necessary for our organization to run smoothly. We will also need to buy land, which there's a lot of in Iceland, and we will need this to implement our project throughout the entire country. And then lastly, we will need equipment for farming, plants, and algae farms.
Next is our partners and shareholders that we wish to work with. So all of these we are hoping to gain some form of funding from, as some of them might find benefit, as we've said earlier, in us lowering their carbon emissions. So one example of that is On Geothermal Energy, and this is a company here in Iceland that produces a lot of energy and also a lot of CO2. And they already partner with some companies that work on carbon sequestration, so we would like to be one of those companies. And VAXA is a company that makes algae farms to sequester carbon, and they are working with On currently, which would be nice for us to partner with both. And then the Icelandic Forestry Association, just the main forestry area of government here, where they kind of focus on importing trees and kind of doing what we're doing. But it would be nice to partner with someone who has similar ideals as us so that we can learn from them, they can learn from us, back and forth. And then RIPE, this is what makes our project a little bit different than other companies that are trying to plant more trees. So RIPE, what they are doing is very interesting. They are genetically engineering plants to have increased photosynthetic ability, so they can sequester more carbon and produce more oxygen. And we would like to do that with some possible native plants and possibly other plants that can survive here without becoming an issue.
So getting into our key activities, one of the most important things we have to do is obtain and produce plants. We want to work alongside RIPE, like we said, and manufacture some plants with increased photosynthetic ability. This would be really important since Iceland is dark like half the year. And then also we want to restore some of the native birch trees because at one point the country was covered in about 20 to 40% birch trees, so bringing back some of those native plants could be really beneficial. And then also planting trees up in other plant life on managed land alongside brush. And then, as we mentioned earlier, the algae farming, working alongside VAXA, creating effective algae farms, but also we want to make sure that we don't interfere with the natural beauty of the country because that could be something that brings a lot of opposition from communities here. And then testing species, if we want to bring in maybe some species that aren't native or even species that were native a long time ago, we would have to make sure that they're able to survive here. So we would have to put some time into testing. And then creating awareness, potentially through advertisements around the country. Garnering support from the communities would be really important to our organization.
All right, I'm going to talk about the cost structure because there's a lot of money that goes into a project like this, and it can be kind of tricky since we are a nonprofit and we need to focus on funding. But the four main things are the trees and the plants, the marketing, the staff, and the testing. So for the plants, of course, we need to purchase some plants, and I would estimate that to be a pretty big portion of this. And then also the production of plants, like I said, working with, working in labs, on these photosynthetic kind of enhanced plants. And then the planting would also be some money. So the total for that, probably around 4.45 million ISK, I would estimate. And then for the marketing, we're going to have TV ads, online ads, possibly on websites. Those can reach a lot of people. A website, we would want that to be very professional, and we would want it to be probably hire somebody to make that because it's very important to have a basis for your work like that. So probably about 300,000 ISK is typical for that. So total would be 372,000 ISK. For the staff, it's very important that we pay our staff well because we want good staff, creative minds, people who are top in their field sometimes. Might be difficult with a nonprofit, but we could see what we can do. Probably a lot of money into salary in that case. So about 11,150,000 ISK total for that. And for testing, as we talked about earlier, can be pricey. So probably it would be best if we don't have to deal with the replanting, and we don't have to use as much resources if we don't have to do that. So about 15,100,000 ISK for that, we assume.
Okay, so for the surplus and revenue, we want to focus on spreading our message throughout the country and internationally through advertisements. And we also want to focus on reinvestments to help improve our mission's resources. And this is just because we are a nonprofit organization, so we really want to focus on the reinvestment. And then for revenue, we are hoping for about 12% to come from donations, and we would like most of our revenue to come from sponsors and government. And we are going to mainly focus through grants, and we're going to ask for a starting value of 20 million ISK through the Climate and Energy Fund, which is like an initiative for improving greenhouse gas emissions.
So as we said earlier, we are a nonprofit organization specifically focusing on environmental restoration services. We're going to be serving Iceland's biotic and abiotic environment by preventing erosion and increasing biodiversity. And we also want to give Iceland's energy a better image. There is a pretty good public image of energy in Iceland right now, but there is still, of course, concerns about carbon emission. And we believe that our organization could help improve the public image of some of the energy companies here in Iceland by lowering their net carbon emissions. And then we want to get into TV advertisement. Maybe it could cost quite a bit of money, but it would definitely reach quite a broad audience. And then also digital ads, again, could cost money, but could be very beneficial. And then social media, which is free to use, it could only reach a specific group, but if we have the right tools, we could reach the community that we want to.
So the last two parts are our business model, segments, and value proposition. So the segments are the different groups of people that we are providing to, basically. So the beneficiary, these are the groups that are benefiting from what we're doing. So the environment of Iceland, of course, which would also affect the wildlife and the people here. If their environment is healthy, they will be too. Of course, global warming also would be helped. And then energy plants, as we've talked about, could be benefited along with the tourism industry is possible because the increased biodiversity might increase tourism. And then for the customers, these are the people that are paying for our services practically. So the government, because we want funding, and the energy plant partners, which would be funding us, would be basically somewhat paying us for this. And for the value proposition, this is what value we bring to the table for these people. So for the beneficiaries, of course, clean energy, better image like we talked about, so people won't look at that carbon emission and think, is this really sustainable? It kind of seems a bit contradictory. So also the increased tourism, beautiful landscapes, kind of ties into that. And for the impact measures, this is how we're going to measure our, basically how well we're doing. So the change in the net carbon emissions over time with our progress is something that we'll look at, and then also forest coverage. And for the customers, of course, the improved biodiversity kind of give Iceland more pride in its sustainability. And this is our overall model, just has everything we just talked about.
So this is just an example of what the sustainability complex looks like. And we are going to be focusing on the national aspect because we are looking into implementing our project throughout the entire country. And we see that this project is very beneficial to Iceland because of the unique environment, and it'll help the country's mission towards moving towards cleaner energy.
So just to quickly touch on some of the sustainable development goals that we hope to reach, the first would be affordable and clean energy, working alongside these energy companies that we mentioned. And then also responsible consumption and production, creating cleaner energy consumption. And then climate action, helping with carbon sequestration. And then lastly, life on land by improving biodiversity in the country.
And there definitely are some challenges we might face here, although we do believe this project to be highly feasible, especially because there are a lot of companies that are actually showing some progress, and we believe that our new advancements would also help. But there are issues such as government funding is very competitive in Iceland, and they are very selective about who they will give it to, and we very much need it for our funding. So that could be an issue at some point. And then also community engagement and agreement. It is hard to have an entire country agree on something, and there might be some that disagree with some of our ways that we are going about this, which could be a problem. And then the environmental restriction, as we said, there's always an issue of introducing plants that aren't from here. They could suffocate plants that are native, the few ones that are kind of all over Iceland right now. And then also plants could reject the environment that we plant. Could be pricey if that were to happen.
So, all in all, we know our project is possible because there used to be plant life on Iceland, and we are hoping to improve the biodiversity throughout the country and reduce CO2 emissions.
Here are our sources. These mostly consist of the companies we're partnering with and where I got the information that basically can estimate what kind of money we're going to need. Tack för det. Thank you. And does anyone have any questions?
Yeah. So thank you so much. Great presentation. I have some questions coming in. Why choose on-power power plants to partner with? And how do CO2 emissions from on-power plants compare to other energy sources?
So, On Power Plant was one of the power plants that we toured in our time here. So from that basis, we know a bit more of them, which influenced our interest in them. And then looking more into it, the fact that they are already working with people who do what we do kind of shows that they might be more willing than some other power plants to fund us. And they also did talk about their carbon emissions at times and how it's something that they're actively working on. So since they are a company that is really striving for that change, that is someone that we feel that we should be reaching out to because they have similar interests as well as being a power plant that we want to talk to. And then what was the second part of that question again?
Yeah. How do CO2 emissions from the on-power power plants, because they have a couple of power plants in Iceland, but how do they compare to from other energy sources?
I would say that a lot of the geothermal energy plants produce similar amounts overall of carbon, but they do have a lot more locations and they are a bigger power plant, so their number is inflated due to that. So it's also a good one to kind of try and sequester because there's a lot of power coming from there and a lot of CO2, therefore.
Do you see other reforestation projects already operating in Iceland as competitors or potential partners, and why?
Yeah, so when we were researching, we did see a couple. There was one main one, I'm not sure if you remember the name of it, that we saw that was working on reforestation in Iceland. It did seem like, at least on their website, they didn't have a lot of recent data, so that is kind of why we're hoping to jump into that area of interest. But yeah, there are existing reforestation efforts in Iceland, but we're hoping that our organization would be able to kind of jumpstart a real increase in reforestation.
How does partnering with VAXA support your goal of restoring biodiversity in Iceland?
So, VAXA, they work on a lot of carbon sequestering. You know, as I said, they partner with ON. The algae farms are something that we actually do want to add to our list of things that we want to do because it can also help with carbon sequestration. That one is not so much on the biodiversity because it is just, of course, specific just types of algae that we are using for photosynthesis, and that is their main purpose. So it is just a bit of an additional carbon sequestration because right now with the glaciers melting at an increasing pace, global warming is getting very out of hand. The carbon is a big problem for us, and we are focusing on both that and biodiversity, but the carbon is the main cause behind our focus.
Okay. So, of course, can you go back to your partners slide?
Yeah.
Or your were talking about the local no, wait, I think it was wherever you're talking about like the local population.
Was that the challenges?
Maybe.
Because I was talking about how like the
Oh yeah, maybe it was another group I looked at. I have a question about how do you plan to interact with people in the general population of Iceland who might be against the concept of bringing in plants which are not currently native to Iceland, or genetically modifying plants that are already here? Because that's a bit of a controversial topic, especially in
yeah,
Europe.
definitely. Do any of you have something you want to say about that, or?
Okay. So we know that like bringing in plants from like native areas, it like might not be like very like wanted by like the people, and it could like ruin, not like ruin, but like change Iceland's like landscape as a whole, and we could like I think I forget where it was, but we could just like make like genetically modify plants and keep them in like a contained area maybe, but make sure that they are reducing CO2 emissions like the same amount as they would normally, and increase like the oxygen in the air.
We also, with some of our outreach, hopefully could make it clear to the community how it would be beneficial in the long run, and maybe work out ways, like we said with the algae, it might not be very popular for the aesthetics, but maybe figure out a way to work with communities that it lines up with our goals, but also doesn't interfere with how they want their country to look, but making it clear that like the benefit will definitely outweigh some of the more aesthetic problems that they might have, for sure.
Yeah. And then also for the genetic modification, there's a lot of misinformation around that entire topic, and people worry that possibly it's not natural. But I do believe that it is very much worth it, because it does not have as much downsides as you would think, and also like kind of telling the people and kind of sharing them, like being open with them about our data and how this helps would be helpful, because there's just a lot of misinformation about genetic modification that makes people kind of afraid of it, not so much against it, but more afraid. And if we can kind of get rid of some of that fear, we can definitely gain more agreement in the community.
Cool. Yeah, and I think you touched on this. Again, like talking with the farmers and the people who own the land. Is that also how you would secure land access for this project? Is working with the people?
Yes, definitely. And also, possibly, there's some government paths that you have to go through in order to get permission for that sort of thing. But of course, we wouldn't just want government permission. We would want, like, if it was government land, then sure, that's something you just get government permission. But, you know, if we were to work with, like, farmers and other people who want to help our cause, then definitely letting them lead is the importance there. Because we should not be interfering with kind of their world and telling them what to do with it. It works better if it's a back and forth conversation.
Cool. Okay, one final question. You mentioned on one slide that you were interested in advertising to an international audience. Why is that important for this business concept versus opposed to just advertising in Iceland?
Advertising like internationally will get people from like out of the country to know what Iceland is doing to help with the CO2 emissions, because the CO2 emissions are higher here because of the renewable energy, and not having lots of plant life here to reduce the CO2 emissions like other countries do. So if other countries know that, and like other people know that Iceland is like actively trying to reduce these emissions, we could possibly get like more donations from other people, knowing that we would be trying to help with like the greenhouse gas emissions and just like global warming in general.
I think you could also do such landscape that people think that it is, because it's not what it used to be. Yeah, that's a really cool idea. I'm super proud of y'all. Awesome. Good job.
Thank you.
Just put it in as it were.
Next was whoever was next. I sent it over. The green tab. Hi guys, this is our presentation on called Green Tap. It's about using wind to enable EV transport across Iceland. I'm Ben. I'm go to Penn State, and I'm an earth science major.
I'm Henry Longfellow. I'm a sustainability student at San Diego State University.
Hi everyone, my name is Brandon Wong, and I'm a meteorology major who goes to Penn State University.
Hi everybody, my name is Karthik Panaya. I'm a postgrad. I used to go to Imperial College London, and I majored in mechanical engineering.
Looking at our organizational structure, we're sort of casting ourselves as a land development firm. We're going to be for-profit and publicly owned. All of us are listed as co-founders, but we do our own things for this.
All right, so starting with the table of contents, we'll start with the problem and the golden circle. Then we'll move on to the nitty-gritty about the energy system, and then we'll get to the business model. Then we'll touch on benefits and considerations, next steps, and then appendix. Starting with the problem and the overall problem, why address wind for EV charging? So Iceland is a very remote country, and along the ring road or the perimeter of the country, the Northeast is known to be very remote, and there's not a lot of access to EV charging stations, as well as wind turbines and just overall like power grid. And with that comes the area is not supportive towards sustainable transportation, and it's not conducive for touring, and also Iceland's rapid transition towards sustainable transportation. And to combat this, we'll be implementing decentralized energy systems to improve the grid resilience in these areas. And we'll be doing this through the implementation of battery storage systems, through wind and hydropower. Hydropower more as a backup, which will improve power supply security along the ring road itself. And this ultimately stabilizes fluctuating energy supplies and protects certain infrastructures like farms and local businesses and communities as well. So to get onto the golden circle, starting with the why, remote communities have little access to charging stations and electricity and grid lines. And then for the how we'll be doing this, we will essentially be implementing these decentralized wind turbines, battery storages, and hydropower infrastructure. And then once the battery is full from the wind power, we'll be using the excess electricity and energy, and to go to, first thing is to hydropower plants, and those will be pumped from high reservoirs through hydropower pumping. And then also the excess wind can go to hydrogen production facilities, which then go to local businesses. And what we want to do is we want to bring it to a brewery, which can ultimately
reduce carbon emissions, and increase the economy. And next, we'll be talking about the Sustainable Development Goals, 4 that we felt connected with our project the most. First, affordable and clean energy. Obviously, wind power is one of the cleanest sources of energy, and it's not too expensive or cheap. Then, decent work in economic growth. Provides a lot of economic growth by implementing these new off-grid power systems, and also promoting transportation, EV transportation. And then it also provides decent work by providing a plethora of different jobs, such as engineering jobs, infrastructure, as well as just small business jobs. And then for industry, we felt it connected with industry innovation and infrastructure, as well as sustainable cities and communities. Again, because of this promotion of EV transportation, which helps grow the economy and makes a more sustainable city, and then with the innovation of these different power plants like wind turbines, etc. And then just quickly to our sustainability complex, first we talk about region/province, or implementation of power generation and storage for a large area of Iceland, and then city community develops the underpopulated eastern Iceland and increases tourism and accessibility.
Thank you, Ben. So Ben has just talked to us about the fact of why we're using wind energy to really build out sort of EV infrastructure across Iceland, especially the northeast. So we just talked about that now. So we are aware there's a big ring road in Iceland, which surprisingly only got completed relatively recently, in the last 20, 30, 40 years or so. And we recognize that in particular with these two energy areas between point 4 and point 5, yes, we have a port there, yes, we have a port there, we have airports here, but it's quite surprising that there isn't really much infrastructure there. And we wanted to explore why that is the case, and perhaps, especially when you're looking to transition to EV transportation, what could we do there to really plug that gap and reduce the range anxiety between two possible big economic centers? And this is what we're proposing. We talked about wind. We have a wind farm, which is connected to a battery energy storage system. So when we have a regulated system that exists to charge. So of course, we have EG charge points, which eventually do help with EVs, which are crossing along this landscape. But we also thought about, well, if we have a battery energy storage system, wouldn't it be pretty great for the local economy in itself? So really connecting to the local grid as a backup source. This could help the local farms, working with their sort of particular industrial tools, in addition to the local airport as a backup energy source in case of any emergency that were to happen. Lastly, as Ben talked about, what is this idea about certain breweries? Well, we said it would be quite nice if we can use as a point of idea of how we can possibly create hydrogen as an e-fuel source. But the fun thing with hydrogen is that, yes, we can power cars, we can use it for industrial processes, which also includes creating a brewery, which itself is a tourist hotspot that would possibly be bringing in some people into that sort of northeast area. I'm going to hand it over to Henry, who's going to talk us to to Brandon, to his business model with Henry.
Yeah, thank you, Karthik, for explaining that. So now we're going to talk about our business model, which is really important. So first, we need to figure out what is the best type of turbine. So we decided to cover a Enercon E138 turbine, which is basically imported from Germany. And also the rated capacity, which means like the maximum electrical output out of the turbine, and it's 4.26 megawatts. And we want to build 2 of them, so the total electrical output will be under 10 megawatts and prevent heavy restrictions from the Master Plan Act. Additionally, the rotor blades are made of glass fiber reinforced epoxy, and such epoxy blades won't corrode and degrade as fast. And also, the rated wind speed is basically the max wind speed needed for the wind turbine to output the max electricity, and that is about around 12 meters per second. And we also understand that Iceland has really extreme weather, so this wind turbine can really withstand extremely strong wind gusts up to 52.5 meters per second. And that's why this turbine is really resilient. To continue, we also want to discuss about battery packs, which are important for the wind turbines. So we decided to use a Sungrow Power Titan 2.0 model, which is designed for really great grid stability. And also, this has lithium iron phosphate batteries, which are relatively cheap. And it also has significantly long lifespans, up to 20 years. And also, these batteries have a total energy capacity of around 5 megawatt hours and outputs about 2.5 megawatts per unit. Additionally, the round trip efficiency, which is basically like the energy for like a discharge and charge full cycle, that is an incredible more than 90% for that. And most importantly, there's also a liquid cooling thermal management system. And this is important to prevent lithium battery cells from overheating and causing disasters. So that's why we believe this model is best for our wind turbine.
Sweet. Thank you, Brandon. All right, so just covering our bases here, I'm going to go over the type of intervention that we're doing here. So we're proposing a power plant, a battery, a brewery. These are all, in a way, products, but they're products that provide a service. Continued operation is a service. For value proposition, the sort of value that we're hoping to bring is it improves consistent power supply in the remote areas of Iceland. It'll increase total power supply for those communities, so they have a greater capacity for more people, more businesses. Increases electric vehicle transportation viability for the East, which is obviously great. And the brewery will act as a tourist spot, which will bring in tourists, and it will improve the local economy. Speaking about local economy, that's going to be great for local businesses. It's going to bring greater customer influx. For locals and residents, it's going to bring consistent power, as I just mentioned. Tourists get a new attraction. The national grid operator has less stress on the grid. And for charge point users, they get increased availability and local viability. This is great for these three because they're the people, who are paying. For a good graph of this, of the people who have low influence, low interest, and high influence, the people we really want to focus on here are the key stakeholders that have high interest and high influence. Among those, we've got Landsvirkjun, who's like the #1 energy company in Iceland. We've got the Climate and Energy Fund, which could possibly give us a grant. And we've got the Ministry of Energy and Environment, which we have to go through to make sure that this works. But most importantly, we have the residents around the area. They're going to have the most influence on this, and they're definitely going to care the most. So in order to address that, we're going to consult with the residents. We're going to hold an open public meeting on the construction plans before anything happens. We're going to submit a formal environmental impact assessment, which is required anyways, but it publishes our policy proposal so that way we get more feedback, and more feedback's always better. And then obviously we will address the feedback, hopefully adapt the process as it goes.
Thanks, Andrew. So now we talked a lot about what the wind farm and of course the battery energy system, what would it actually create revenue? And we really quote this was the charge point is the first point. So it's currently charging about 65 Icelandic kroners, and we're looking at, look, if people really want to go into this space, we need to discount this. And with a discount of about 80,000 charges that happen, and they're topping up about 3/4 of a tank, figuratively speaking, you're looking about sort of $2.3 million a year. I'm going to use millions here because a lot of the stuff is imported. It's just easy for us to work with. Electricity to the grid is a lot cheaper, of course. That's not the main criteria, but it also brings in some sort of revenue. And in the next slide, we'll talk exactly how that profit does come across. But from day one, we do get those sort of profits coming through as well. Of course, tourism, we talked about why, because we do have something that pays off really quickly. So we have the charge points, have a reason to be there in the first place. But you also want to bring in people in that area as well, almost like the Michelin star example. As a way for people to start commuting between these two economic centres in itself. And of course, with the cost structures, we want to have fixed and variable costs. The fixed capex costs, we can see connection to the grid, the charging infrastructure, the wind, and the battery storage is almost $30 million, which is quite expensive. But of course, a variable cost of $115,000 a year for just to maintain the infrastructure, and about $563,000 a year to maintain about 8, or I think close to 9.5 full-time equivalent employees in this organization. And we can see that in about 13 years, we can kind of break even. But also from day one itself, we are making money. So there's a stable profit incentive for us to work with. So this is something that could keep by itself. And of course, a lifetime revenue of 75 million, a sort of cost optimization of that. And we said, well, cost is about 330 million. This is well within those sort of bounds as well.
Thank you, Karthik. All right, I'm going to go pretty fast. We've got our key resources here. The things that we really need is these small-scale turbines that Brandon mentioned that are designed to withstand the Icelandic condition. Same with the battery energy storage systems. We're going to need to develop a wind-based microgrid so that way wind power goes into the batteries before anything else. We need wind and meteorological data so that way we know the best place to put the turbines. And we need land rights for the remote portions of the northeast portions of Iceland. Looking at our surplus, we're probably going to redirect all surplus towards expansion of battery storage and EV chargers, the typical stuff. Maybe we're going to do a cashback incentive program for charge points. That could be interesting. Invest in transmission lines because those are a little dilapidated, and maybe invest in a better deep water port. As for the feasibility of the project, it's very technologically viable. We went over everything that we would need. It's very doable, but the big issue is the money would be a lot. There's another Icelandic wind farm that was 28 turbines called Vaðaldúfur that I'm bad at pronouncing stuff. I'm sorry. That one was way more expensive, but it was also way larger. So we really don't know a general sense. So that's the biggest hurdle that we're going to have.
Some of the sort of benefits is why we even bother with this is, of course, the point of this is building in grid resilience in Iceland. We understand there's hydrogen, hydropower, and of course geothermal. But one of those biggest things with anything with energy security is we cannot rely on one thing for too long, for too often as well. So this gives a sort of a respite for the grid to work with, especially in a rural area where infrastructure, transmission infrastructure is very difficult to work with. The second is, of course, connectivity. We are looking from an economic point of view, from east and west, north and northeast as well, almost a connection itself, and also the local energy security as well. This is going to support about 11,000 people in sort of area. This is for the people, given the corporation that we are. It is owned by the people, in hope that it does happen eventually as well, and as a testbed to see if this can be done here, how this could be expanded further into other remote parts.
Thank you. Looking at the considerations, the risks, the big one is these wind farms have a lot of regulation at high megawatts, but we're not going to be facing that. There's things like turbines with birds flying into them. We can paint the turbine blades. Turbine lifespan can be maintained. Basically, every consideration is fine.
So we also gather wind data from the Global Wind Atlas. This is a rough region where we could build our wind farm. And as you can see, it has really high mean wind speeds of up to around 9.3 meters per second. And also, we also look into the habitat. So while our wind farm may impact wetlands, notice that our farm would not impact any of the common eider duck, which is along the marine shores, the seabird colonies, and importantly, bird habitats that live in wetlands. And our wind farm will be right over here, so as you can see.
All right. To get to a rough timeline of the activities, we'll first consult local populations and then propose plans to the government. Then for land assessment, we will gather more specific data. And then for permitting, we'll conduct environmental impacting assessment and stay within public favor. And for initial development, we'll begin setting foundations for the infrastructure. And then for continued development, we'll be constructing the infrastructure itself. And then for future, we will continue maintenance. And here's our social business model canvas. And then to conclude, the lack of EV chargers and power grids, we're constructing small wind farms with connected battery packs for surplus storage. And these would be sent to hydropower plants as well as to local businesses to be constructed nearby. And that's it.
Thank you very much for listening to us.
Yeah, we'll just get into the appendix.
We're out of time.
We're out of time? Okay.
We have a long out of time, but
Just ignore the next 20 slides.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, wow.
Basically our sources, basically.
Cool. So, I have a bunch of questions. But let's see what we got. So, you mentioned trying to keep it under the master plan. It's what, like 10 megawatts?
Yes.
Why do you want to keep it under that? What are the disadvantages of having a larger plant?
So we did some research about what the Master Plan Act, and we know that if our wind farm is under 10 megawatts, it would be considered a minor power plant, and we don't need to go through this really long, heavy restriction process that goes to Parliament and all that stuff. So that's why we specifically said that we want to build 2 turbines, because as mentioned before, each turbine will give an output of electricity of 4.26 megawatts. So for 2 turbines, that's around 8.5 megawatts. If we have 3, it will go over 10 megawatts, and we're going to go through this multi-long process. So that's why we want to make sure this wind farm is efficient and support clean and wind energy for multiple communities across northeastern Iceland.
Wind power is super controversial in Iceland due to many people being against the visual appearance of wind turbines in the untouched landscape. Do you think your project has potential to improve public opinion of wind energy as a whole? And how would you do this? And what else do you think could be done to improve opinion of wind in Iceland?
So that is an excellent question about, the visuals of a wind turbine, and we understand that multiple residents may not like it, but at the same time, wind energy has not been as widespread in Iceland. We want to explore an alternative power source for most communities, and like I mentioned before, we only want 2 turbines, and it's also well away from communities. So as I circled before in one of the previous slides, it's in a wetland area, also not in a national park, to be clear. So it's not a national park, and residents will probably not hear the wind turbines either. And to also stress the importance of it, of how to improve public opinion, I feel like residents need to better understand the benefits of wind turbines. And we understand hydropower is the dominant source, but we feel like residents should be a little bit more open-minded to wind energy. And it's also relatively consistent, and also a wind turbine is really resilient against extreme weather. So when the power goes out, the wind turbines can substitute, let's say, the hydropower power, and the power keep running for as long as possible. So that's why we think wind turbine energy will be beneficial to communities there and also improve public opinion. And lastly, to address the visuals, we understand that they may not be as pretty, but it's only 2 wind turbines, and there'll be efforts to relocate any potential animals in that area. But most of them, like I said before, are in those habitats, the wetland habitats, the common eider duck. Most of them are well away from the region that we are looking into.
Are there farms in that region, or is it just
No, there's literally nothing.
Literally nothing?
It's just empty land. We made sure. Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
Do you know the proportion of vehicles rented by tourists which are EVs for hybrids? And did you also consider placing some of these systems near already existing popular tourist points in the Northeast? For example, like On Power, the Orca, they run, I have to say, years ago, they installed enough, they're not superchargers, but they installed charging points for EVs so that people could do the ring road.
Yep.
They're not super nice, but that option is there. So just curious what other spots you looked at for superchargers.
So I think the way we kind of thought about the sort of supercharger network is using our own experiences, especially I'm from the UK. We have a very similar issue with range anxiety. And looking at the sort of the 4th lecture we had, I'm so sorry about the professor who was giving it, but the name of the professor who gave it, we recognize that it still is persistent in Iceland. And the thing is, yes, you have a charger, but do we have a reliable charger network? And if something were to happen, something cut off, could we still have a network that would exist beyond the hydro energy power, beyond geothermal in itself? So this would almost be as a way to test that assumption itself. We understand that, more than half the cars that have been currently bought in Iceland are for rental cars in itself. And there's a possibility that this car mass would have to somehow go through this area, which is why we came up with the 80,000 estimate, which in hindsight is quite conservative. But we recognize that given the size of these car batteries are increasing at quite a rapid rate in itself, it is inevitable that an upgrading charging network would happen. relying on just on would be okay, but we also see why not come with another player to help see what else and sort of innovation that we can bring in. Hence, a wind farm is a way to kind of show if this is possible. So in a way, we kind of see this as a way to test if wind power, along with battery storage, could help build a network across rural areas in Iceland.
So I really appreciate that you put that the local residents are super important to you for this project. How would you proceed? Because you would have to, before you would start break ground, you have to come to the community and basically get community permission to pull this off. Even if it's underneath the master plan limit, you still can't build something without the community approval. How would you proceed in the event that public acceptance of the wind farms is very low after meeting with the local community? What would you try to do to work with them? Because I can tell you, telling them that no, you don't have to worry about it, it's actually good, that's not going to work. So how would you proceed with that?
You want to take the question?
Well, I mean, obviously, what the residents want is most important, and if they don't want it, then they're not going to get it. But we would obviously want to further investigate why specifically they don't want wind power, and then maybe invest in a re-education program. Or that sounds weird, but yeah, not that. More, I meant like a seminar, but. Yeah, we want to know why they don't like it, if the reasons why they don't like it are misfounded beliefs, and if so, then maybe we could give them the right idea.
Just as an add-on point, it's really a bottom-up approach. We understand, as Henry mentioned, it's starting with what the problem is and how wind farms fix it, rather than here's a wind farm, this will fix the problems. That is a starting approach, I think, with a lot of different things. Test use cases, which has happened in environments such as Iceland, in other parts of the world as well. And lastly, to really start with, okay, so if this is a visual impact, it lasts 20 years, what next? What are the problems that the community is facing that this could solve in the next 20 years? So if you're thinking quite short term, what are the short term things? If it's long term, what are those long-term things? So really understanding what the priorities of the locals is actually equally as important to kind of then convince the wind element. Yeah.
I'm super impressed with the extent to which you've gone to the logistics and the cost structure of all of this, everything going down to a deep water port. It sounds like you could start tomorrow. So if you were to start tomorrow, what do you imagine the biggest challenge would be for implementing this type of network?
Sorry, only two of us get to speak it. I'd say.
Quick answer if you can, because
Oh,
we're on time.
the biggest challenge would probably be just coordination with everything, especially if we're starting tomorrow. We would need like a month. That's kind of all I got.
Try 6.
Yeah, it's just getting the wind to be fine. It's just convincing people in the first place. I think it starts with that first. If we can't convince people why this should be done, it will never work out. The transportation itself, we thought about deep water ports, why we think that's important, but we see in hindsight that isn't the issue. Upon other consultations, is getting people on board. That's where we start first.
One final question. You touched briefly upon hydrogen storage linked to the brewery. How does this system work, and why would the brewery be connected at all? Can you answer that quickly?
Yes. Good question. I think I'm not a brewer. I don't drink actually, but I do know in Scotland there have been sort of examples of where Scotland and the UK, where they connected a hydrogen electrolyzer as the sort of excess hydrogen to the local brewery. I think it's part of one of the processes of create specific types of ale and whiskey and beer. That's all I know. But it works. So we said, why not?
So people are doing it, you haven't figured it out yet. but that's
Exactly,
okay.
yeah,
Awesome.
that's
Great. Well, awesome. Good job. Okay, cool.
Hi, thanks for coming. Today we are, for our green program project, we took a look at space-based solar power. And my name's Murphy. I'm an electrical engineer at Virginia Tech.
My name's Daniel. I'm a geography major at Pennsylvania State University.
And my name is Ali. I'm joining from Istanbul, Bahçeşehir University. I'm an energy systems engineering student.
And finally, my name is Joe Simpkins. I'm an aerospace engineering major from Penn State as well.
Yeah, so before we get started, this is our outline of our project. So first we're just gonna go over the golden circle, then we're gonna get into the nitty gritty of our business model. Later we'll get into some technical aspects of solar-based or space-based solar power, and then we'll go into cost, feasibility, and then a conclusion. To start, why is this an issue? Why do we wanna solve this? Terrestrial solar panels are not being used to their full potential. That's the main thing. Things like the atmosphere already drops so much of the solar's potential energy. And then on top of that, things like clouds getting in the way or other shadows limit the full potential of the solar panel technology. And so how are we gonna fix this? Solar panels in space, we looked into it, could be 10 times more efficient just due to the fact that they're directly hit by the sun with no interference by atmosphere or shadows or anything like that. And so what we are going to implement, you can see in like a kind of rudimentary diagram right there. We'll have a satellite out in space with solar panels, and then this is going to take this energy and wirelessly power transfer it back down to Earth where there's a terrestrial receiver, and then we'll sell the energy to the local grid and on-site clients.
The value of our project comes from the continuous renewable energy sources, the cost-effective strategies we have in place of using solar power, the reduction in CO2 emissions, and the reliable baseload energy that would be provided. We can go into this we can go further depth about the value in the questions because there's a lot of value in this kind of subject. We projected that if we were to launch a 500 megawatt space-based solar power system in the atmosphere, we would generate about 4.38 terawatt hours of renewable electricity annually, and it would have the potential to reduce carbon emissions by 4 million tons per year. That's the equivalent of removing 850,000 cars from the road or planting 10 million trees. And on top of that, this concept is something that can grow, so the effects and the benefits would be exponential. The main intervention is to have a long-term clean energy source in space that collects solar energy and converts it into and transmits it using WPT's wireless power transmission, and turning that into electricity we could use on Earth. We would spread our presence by collaborating with utility providers, national energy agencies, international climate initiatives, and also collaborating with aerospace and renewable industries to improve our technology as we go on. With our surplus profits and whatever we would earn, we would use that to expand our operations, grow around the country, improve our technologies, use the money to maintain our satellites, and then use the excess electricity in high demand energy infrastructure, and then also reserve some money and energy in case there are disasters.
So in terms of social development goals, we have 4 goals to achieve. One of them is number 7, affordable and clean energy. And the next, we have sustainable cities and communities, which means number 11. And the next, we have number 12, responsible consumption and production. For the last part, we have climate action, which means number 13. So our workflow will be like this on the left-hand side. First, we're going to collect the solar rays, and then we're going to send them to the orbital satellite system. Then we're going to produce the electricity there. Same process, just like terrestrial solar panels. And then with wireless power transmission, we're going to send them to the ground, to the earth. And then we can finally distribute it to the companies, grids, whatever it is. At the last one, we have ground control and monitoring part. This is for avoiding overload and collapsing in the grids. So that's why we put there. At the right-hand side, you can see the partners and key stakeholders divided into 3 groups, just like aerospace, energy and utilities, and government and policy. For the aerospace, we have SpaceX partner. For the energy and utilities, we have AEP, Next Era Energy, Green Mountain Energy. And the next one, we have US government and Clean Energy States Alliance. For the key activities, actually, we want to make sure that our system works well in the research and development process. So to design our system. The next one is like strategic collaboration. As we mentioned before, we have some partners and key stakeholders. When we design our systems and when everything was set, we're gonna meet with the partners and make strategic collaboration together. Next one is like we have to make some risk assessment for the process and forecasting for the future. And we want to make sure that after that process, we have to test and simulate our process projects and look for the carbons that we replace in the next decades. And then we're gonna we're gonna make optimization and preparation for the final stage, and then we're gonna deploy our satellites in the orbits. For the next part, we have 2 different segments divided into 2 groups. One of his beneficiaries, like energy secure governments, underserved and remote regions, climate vulnerable communities, and nation transitioning from fossil fuels, like, for example, my country. In the second part, we have customers and stakeholders, such as utility providers, grid operators, government energy agencies, renewable infrastructure investors, international sustainability partnerships. They all have one common part in this whole process, and that is space-based renewable energy systems.
Yeah, so for our wireless power transfer, there's 2 main techniques and ways to go about this. First being microwaves, and second being lasers. Right now, microwaves are way more well-researched field. Just think of microwaves in your house. It's a similar, obviously this one's in a way different application, but it's the same idea. They have medium power efficiency. We've researched and seen 50 to 60% for our application, which sounds bad when you compare it to power lines on the ground, but compared to other options for wireless power transfer, it's actually not too bad. And the reason 50%, it's 50% is losses compound due to power transformation steps. For example, when electricity changes states to electrical magnetic waves and back again, and then amplifying that power, all of those come with losses that compound. And also another positive of this transmission technique is it's less affected by atmospheric conditions compared to lasers, which is much more experimental, less research done about it, and power efficiency has been seen to be about 15%. The good thing is it's very accurate and compact, and you can make these devices in smaller, more compact forms. But this device is very affected by atmospheric conditions, which leads to it having such bad efficiency.
All right, so keeping on the trend of sort of technical difficulties that we might face and considering what we're going to do, we're going to talk about the orbit itself. So what we're going to do is called a geostationary orbit, as you can sort of see in the graphic we have here. What that means is that our satellite will stay relative to the Earth, stay in the same point above the Earth, because the rotation of our orbit will exactly match the rotation of the Earth itself. So this is really convenient for what we need to do, because what we can do with it is make sure that we are always transmitting to the same point on the ground, so we don't have to worry about moving our receiver or anything, which is really good. And it also gives a lot of freedom to send our information to different points on Earth if we want to address multiple communities at once, as well as giving us a constant baseload electricity production. Because we're so far away from Earth to create this system that we're having, it means that we have essentially full sunlight for year-round, as compared to on the ground. Obviously, you have day and night, so you don't have as long a cycle, and we can produce a lot more electricity this way. Now, going to costs a little bit, first of all, we're going to need people to work for us. We're going to start pretty small, just with one to sort of proof of concept. So we only need really around 10 employees, and the average pay for the jobs we're looking at is around $75,000 US a year. So that means our cost for employees will be $750,000 per year. Then we also need our receiver, which is called a rectenna. Those cost around $215 per square meter. We need a 1.5 kilometer diameter, which is pretty massive. So that gives us $1.5 billion, which we will need an investment to start up, which is obviously not ideal. And then we assume maintenance to be around 15% of that cost at $225 million a year. And then also we need a ground station for our people to work and keep track of our satellite, which is around $500,000 a year to keep that up and running. So this gives us total facility costs of $1.5 billion initial for that rectenna, and then $226 million annually. Next up, the launch itself. So we have, based on a NASA study that was done that was working on a 2 gigawatt system, we're doing 500 megawatts to match sort of what a standard coal plant would be able to produce. So extrapolating from that report, we got that our weight would be around 1,500 tons, which only a SpaceX Starship would actually be able to launch for us at the moment, because we want to go with corporation. But even with that, it would be 10 launches at $110 million apiece. So that means that the total cost of a launch is $1.1 billion. Again, pretty expensive. But the hardware does last a pretty long time, about 15 years. So that gives us a yearly launch cost of around $73 million per year. So the total cost we got is that initial cost is massive of $2.6 billion. We would need some financial support there. And then electricity production is 4.4 terawatt hours with a yearly cost of $299 million. So that gives a levelized cost of energy, which is sort of a measurement of how much you have to pay for your energy, of $68 per megawatt hour. As you can sort of see in this graph here, that puts us right in the range with some of the more renewable energies between solar and wind. So that puts us in a pretty good spot. Obviously, we'd have to increase prices a little bit so that we're making a profit, because we are a for-profit corporation. But that puts us in a good spot to be productive.
So in this graph, as you see, we have levelized cost of energy comparison. This is actually showing the carbons that we're gonna replace from the Earth. So as Joe's mentioned before, we have $68 per megawatt hour as LCOE value. So it will be around like here, like almost starting point for the geothermal. As you see in the conventional generation part, we're gonna replace that coal industries carbons for the decades.
Yeah, so this is just our Canvas business model plan. Just for reference, we talked about all this already.
All right, now in terms of feasibility, what is feasible so far, as we sort of discussed, the orbital strategy is effective and efficient. Having a satellite in geo works well and would really work with our project well as well. We would have competitive costs when compared to alternative energy methods, as we sort of talked through. Obviously, no carbon emissions. Depending on the rocket that we use, if we were to use Starship, there would be some. But our hope is that because we, as you'll see later, will have to wait anyways, we would have more sustainable rockets, probably using hydrogen fuel, which doesn't produce any carbon at all. So that would be the ideal, as the SLS rocket in the US does now. It also has lower maintenance needs because there's no dust getting in the solar panels, and is highly efficient. However, we do have those massive initial costs that would need heavy investment from interested parties, which we think we can find because there's a lot of interest in the field and getting power off of Earth, but we would have to find that funding.
Moving into the not so feasible currently aspects of the project, the microwave technology for wireless power transfer over long distances still has significant issues that kind of hinder this project. Firstly, low efficiency compared to other power transfer methods over long distances, as discussed before. There's also a lot of uncertainty regarding human health and safety when blasting this much power down to Earth. And then also, just this goes back, when microwaves are shot down over distances, there's this coning out, spreading out effect that also hasn't been seen in these types of applications. So overall, for this project, we believe it's not currently feasible, but with more research and technology improvement, it could be.
So just to quickly wrap things up, the goal of this project was to maximize the efficiency of solar panels and produce electricity renewably by removing the atmospheric interference that you get in terrestrial solar panels, and also get rid of those day cycle penalties that we have to face on the Earth. The costs are competitive with other sources of electricity, assuming that we're able to get the technology that we need. And it's much lower land usage, even though we have that huge amount of space. The amount of power that we're able to produce with the solar panels are much more efficient than it would be if on a terrestrial farm. And we do have those high initial costs that would require high level financial support, but we believe that we have the ability to find those sources through people that are interested in this sort of project. And given technological advancement and investor support, we believe that this project could be feasible in the future. However, at the moment, it is not. So that sort of wraps up what we have, if anyone has any questions.
Super cool idea. Never seen anything like it before outside of science fiction, but you convinced me. Awesome. So one note where I'm a little bit skeptical is when I was growing up, I had a friend whose microwave had a leak, and every time you ran the microwave, it would shut down the Wi-Fi. Okay, so when you tell me about the coning effect, where it's like you're beaming energy down to Earth, and it like hits a cone, what are the concerns about that? Is it microwaves? Like what type of wavelength are you using?
So they are very high frequency microwaves, and so the coning out effect over distance, microwaves tend to spread out, and that's why the Recten is so massive and expensive. And so current research is this research is currently being done. So it's kind of hard to give you a straight answer, but I will say from my experience in the electrical engineering field, like it seems it's a very ever moving field. There's constantly like innovations being made. So I'm sure the microwave technology has improved since your childhood.
Cool. You underlined underserved and remote regions as potential beneficiaries, but knowing that the system would be in a geostationary orbit, how would countries or grids in these regions participate in the business model to ensure access to energy, especially if the costs of those receivers, like I mean the huge dish is like what, $1.5 billion? Like how do you give that to an underserved area?
Yeah, sure. So while the costs are really high, that cost is something that the company itself would front. Or once we have the ability to do this, obviously we need to establish ourselves a little bit more. And in terms of geostationary orbit, so while our satellite would be in one position, that doesn't actually limit where we can beam the microwaves down to on Earth, because we're like thousands of kilometers up in the air anyways. So the difference in the angle between beaming it straight down at the equator versus beaming it to the US or beaming it to Kenya or beaming it to Australia or something is relatively small in comparison, and we would probably have multiple up in different levels in geo orbit. So that means that we would be able to reach those communities once we establish ourselves, obviously. But we do have the ability to do so, and as I said, we would front the costs for the rec tenant itself, and the communities would just have to pay for electricity, which we would expect, hopefully they would be able to pay the same amount as, because we determine the cost of energy in relation to other sources, it's pretty similar, so it should be about the same.
When you, so it sounds like the idea was that solar in space is more efficient. So when you work in the losses from the energy transfer like to the ground, so you collect the energy in space, beam it to ground, there's a collection in ground. What is the difference in the efficiency of your overall process versus like just a solar farm on Earth?
Yeah, just based off like the kind of rudimentary statistics we found. Originally, it said the actual absorbing of energy is 10 times more efficient in space when you factor in maybe a 50% or maybe even lower transfer rate. Maybe that's down to 5x, 4x. I still believe with like advances in technology, it's definitely something to look into. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Also, space lasers. Sounds like they get a lot of skepticism from the public. How would you go about addressing this?
We're not really calling it space lasers, I guess. We're going with the term wireless power transfer. Microwaves are skeptical, but there's never been any signs of it being genuinely serious or found research for it to be dangerous for individuals.
I also want to mention while we were researching, it's actually funny. One of the websites we were looking at who's looking into this, they were doing the laser technology. That was their outlook. They weren't doing microwaves, and they were like advertising it in a way where it was hard to like. I was confused what their method was, and I was like, oh wait, that's lasers, but. Of course, they're not going to say that on their website because it sounds scary. It was like they're using all the big words like, infrared light rays instead of lasers. So I don't know. There's definitely skepticism when you just call them space lasers. So.
Yeah. Cool. Awesome. Let's see. I think we're short on time, so I think that's good. Awesome. Great. Good job. Thank you.
Kat, how do I put in presenter view? Oh, there we go. Okay, cool. Hello, everyone. We will be presenting our company, Electro. My name is Evelyn Craw. I am from Penn State. I am majoring in energy engineering as well as minoring in environmental engineering as well as earth and sustainability.
Hi everyone, and my name is Kat Hogan, also going to Penn State, similar major and minor, energy engineering, environmental engineering, another minor in sustainability leadership. And we'll be going over today relation to our how, what, why Golden Circle, sustainable development goals, as well as our business model, and getting into the more specifics and how we want to proceed in the future. So starting with the Golden Circle. Looking at the why initially, there are coastal communities throughout the world that still heavily rely on fossil fuels or heavily emitting emissions for their energy resources. So not necessarily Iceland is not really our focus on this type of technology. But in these coastal communities, wave energy is something that is inexhaustible and not really tapped into. And so being able to merge this need for coastal communities to have energy production with less emissions, along with the energy of waves. That is where we're looking for this company. And then how we're doing that is to develop an understanding of different wave generation technologies that exist, as there are quite a few of them. Also understanding our stakeholders and the potential ecological impacts. And then best suited locations where this could be implemented. And then as well as seeing how we can innovate these different types of technologies, as they are not widely well used yet. And then what specifically, as synthesizing all of this together, is a company that is looking for different coastal communities and providing energy through waves. And then this type of energy will be able to implement it into the grid, supporting energy security and reliability.
The sustainability goals we will be looking at are the affordable and clean energy, industry, innovation and infrastructure, sustainable cities and communities, climate action, as well as life below water. And our project will be impactful at the national state level as well as the region and province.
Wait, so as I mentioned earlier, there's lots of different wave and different tidal technologies, but this is the one that we decided to focus on today. I just want to give you a brief image, because next we're going to go into some videos, kind of how it's put together, so you can have a better understanding of how this generates energy. So this will just show kind of the construction of the technology itself. So the main company that has initially started research on this type of technology is called Swell. They're based out of the UK and Cyprus. And so with this type of technology, currently the parts that they were using to manufacture already exist, so no new manufacturing type facilities need to be made. We're also looking at using recycled parts. So you'll see here the yellow is the modular things that'll move with the wave, and then the blue and gray are like different pistons that'll move back and forth with the cyclical wave movement. And then you'll also see, you can probably go on to the next one so we don't take too much time. And now you'll see specifically how this type of movement works. So as they'll go up and down with the water, just here in a second. There you go. You'll see how the pistons are able to move back and forth. There's a rigid bar that is, connecting each one to each other. And so through that movement is how the energy is generated. And then also you can just see the scale of what these would look like. I know when I first saw it, I thought they would be like the size of a table, but you can get people on them. So anyway, we'll move on now so we can continue on. But yeah, so as I mentioned, this company, or the original developers of this technology have had successful trials where these types of technologies have been out in the water generating energy, and so it does exist at a research and development scale. The last publishing information that they've been able to come out with has been a few years, and so we're still looking for investment and funding for this type of technology, but just to share that it has been successful in the Mediterranean. And then we'll get into our business model. So our resources, first materials, so specifically the technology of the wave energy generator, as well as the physical materials for implementation and construction. And then the rest of these, partnership policy support, so through local government and community through local community. These are our stakeholders, which we'll get into in a little bit. So activities, or the timeline of what this would look like, first starting out with the continuation of research and development. So we'll also get into ideas that we have for innovation in the future to how to make this more practical and more energy production. But anyway, so we're looking to continue research and development for a little bit more. Next would be ascertaining a location and those partnerships. So we'll also get into the opportunities that we have for feasibility of different locations, but more information will go into that. Next, stakeholders, engagement, and involvement. So making sure that we are prioritizing the local community, working with them so that they have an understanding of this technology, and making sure that it can work into their grid system and everything. Next, permitting, installing also takes time. And then once we get it, installed and it's actually up and running, we'll continue this process of collecting data and assessing, how impactful is it, and being able to have, key metrics of understanding how successful best solar project is and then how we can continue to improve upon it. And then lastly, outreach and marketing. I know it's been mentioned in other presentations, but it's important to have public opinion that understands what this technology is, and then when this is more widespread knowledge, it can be more easily involved and developed in different communities.
Next, I will be discussing the stakeholders, primarily what they provide and what they care about. Starting off with our business stakeholders, these include Swell, investors, employees, and power companies. Swell will provide the waveline magnet design and the technical expertise, as well as support installation, testing, and performance improvements. They care about the successful deployment and commercialization of their technology. Investors will fund the pilot project through investments or loans, and they expect repayment from electricity sales. They care about the project risks, long-term profit, and financial feasibility. For employees, they will operate, monitor, maintain, and manage the business, handle daily operations, reporting, partnerships, and repairs. They care about fair salaries, safe working conditions, and long-term business success. Lastly, the power companies will purchase the electricity from the waveline magnet system and connect to the power grid. They care about reliability, energy price, and consistent power output. Next is our community and environmental stakeholders. Starting with community, we want to focus on coastal communities as well as fishermen. So coastal communities may be affected by installation, visual impacts, jobs, and ocean access. They can benefit from local employment and clean energy, and they care about community impacts, safety, and local economic benefits. As for fishermen, they use the same ocean space for fishing, boating, transportation, and recreation. They need safe navigation routes and protected fishing areas, and they care about avoiding disruptions to their work and ocean access. As for our environmental stakeholders, we have government agencies as well as environmental groups. So government agencies will provide grants, permits, renewable energy support, and they will help approve offshore energy projects. They care about clean energy goals, safety, and environmental regulations. As for the environmental groups, they monitor effects on marine life, habitats, and coastal ecosystems, help evaluate environmental risks before and after deployment, and they care about biodiversity, underwater noise, seabed disruption, and wildlife protection. Next, we're going to go into our finances. So for the cost review, some of our fixed costs include waveline, magnet device manufacturing, floating assemblies, modular spine systems, power takeoff systems, generator, mooring and anchoring system, subsea cable and grid connection, shore station electrical equipment, permitting and environmental studies, as well as installation and commissioning. So basically, fixed costs means that these won't change in costs over time much. Now, variable and ongoing cost, that's the type of cost that's going to change possibly over time. This includes operations and monitoring, routine maintenance, repairs and replacement parts, marine vessels access and labor, corrosion and biofueling control, insurance, and site leasing, research and development updates, as long as data collection and performance testing. Moving on to the cost breakdown, we have the waveline magnet manufacturing, about $1.2 million. This is the largest cost we have because the device itself includes floating assemblies, spine structure, and modular body. It is quite a big system. Next would be the power takeoff system and generator, which we estimate about $500,000. The PTO/generator is the part that converts the wave motion into the electricity. Next is the mooring and anchoring system, $300,000. This is the device that holds the device offshore in a high wave region, so it makes sure it doesn't go anywhere. Next is the subsea cable and shore grid connection, which is about $450,000. It's needed to move electricity from the device to shore or to a power buyer. Next is installation, permitting, and environmental review, which we put at about $350,000. This covers vessels, deployment, site studies, and permits. Next is contingency and repair fund, about $200,000. This is added because ocean energy has a high risk of storms, corrosion, and maintenance. The total startup cost is about $3 million, and we did this for a 1 megawatt system. So for the revenue and salaries, our annual revenue or expenses would be electricity sales, maintenance, monitoring, loan payment, founder, team salaries, insurance, admin, reporting. And so for our estimated amount, we're thinking about 367,000 for electricity sales, 100,000 for maintenance and monitoring, 116 for loan repayment, 120 for salaries, and about 25,000 for insurance, admin, and reporting. So a total estimate left over after all this would be about 6,400 per year. And for funding, we plan on outsourcing grants and loans, specifically the Clean Energy Grant that provides 2.1 million, about 70% of our costs, and the Green Business Loan, about 900,000, which would be about 30%, giving us an overall of 3 million. And these are our assumptions. So I assumed a 1 megawatt pilot system, about 30% capacity factor, 14 cents per kilowatt hour, about an annual electricity generation of 2.6 million, an annual electricity revenue of 367,000, and then, like stated previously, about 3 million for startup costs. As for our loan, we would take about 900,000. The interest rate would be about 5% over 10 years, which would be 116,000 per year. Next is our project feasibility and challenges. So we have some potential locations for this. However, some of the challenges include high wave activity. This type of technology cannot handle that. It needs to be in shallow coastal areas, possibly even Great Lakes or bays. If you take a look at the bottom graph, this is a world view. The waveline magnet cannot handle 120 to 160 kilowatt per meter, so that's about the green and up. So we do not want our tech in that region. We want to focus on the blue, which is the ideal, about 30 kilowatt per meter. And above, you can see this is more for the US.
And then looking into the future and different means of innovation, as you saw, there are flat areas of the floating modulars, and an example could be that you could put photovoltaic solar panels on these types of modulars to incorporate solar along with wave energy. You also need an anchoring or mooring system for this wave energy, and you could do that with an already installed offshore wind turbine. So these different types of technologies can work together. You'll also see that sometimes the wind is blowing and the sun isn't shining, and so these different technologies will be able to work together to give a more overall even profile. And then also when concerned on ecological habitats, there has been interest in initial research in implementing artificial reefs and these types of technologies, so to help the local animals in that area. Another thing is that this energy, along with the water that's around it, can be used for electrolysis or even desalination. And then just to summarize, the problem that we were looking to solve is emissions from unsustainable energy sources along coastal communities. Our proposed solution is harnessing wave energy while supporting the local community and ecology. Our project analysis would require an initial investment of around $3 million. And then future steps as we're looking to have future innovations and then eventually commercialization.
I would like to mention that this type of system can produce up to 100 megawatts, which would be about $122.64 million per year. And Swell is not fully commercialized yet. However, they're in the final stages of pre-commercial development. Any questions?
Great job. Especially just the two of you did a whole lot of work on this. I'm super impressed. Awesome. I had a bunch of questions.
No way.
Let's see. So I know you have a huge blue area where you can put it. Again, if you were to start tomorrow, where would you go?
Lovely. So as Evelyn mentioned earlier, we're interested in a little bit, or we're interested in the blue, but also more coastal regions. So if we're starting tomorrow, we're looking for somewhere that is similar to the Mediterranean Sea. So probably within the U.S., Great Lakes would be a great option. There's also interest in having offshore wind farm in either Lake Erie or Ontario. So potentially even partnering with those groups to implement that there.
Yeah, so you're partnering with Swell, which I think super smart partnership. But what are you providing that they are not already?
Definitely. So we would be able to provide further insights and ideas for innovations to the current technology, and then we would also be looking to commercialize it. They are more specifically research and development, and so where we would step in would be to connect us well with different key stakeholders, connect them with communities that would be interested in this technology, and then working on the actual implementation of this type of technology.
And similar to like the space solar energy and the wind energy, how would you, how do you plan to address public disapproval based on the visual impact of your product? Since this issue alone can cause communities to reject social technologies, and also that, I mean, there's already like a lot of pushback from like the fishing industry against like offshore wind. So, do you think that there would be a similar pushback towards your project?
Yeah, well, especially if we want to be, synthesizing it with other technologies such as offshore wind, that would definitely pose to be a challenge that we'd be facing. But one of the, when considering visual impact, there has been, specifically, there was a offshore wind farm that was going to be that was projected to happen off like the Jersey coast, and so there were communities that were not happy with that, specifically because they had really expensive real estate along that coastline. So one of the ideas that we could have is to look for areas that don't have expensive real estate along that coastline, so that it would be further away from common tourist travel areas, or just areas where a lot of people frequent. Also making sure that we're out of state or national parks would be important, but also just making sure that we're communicating with people. I know that was one of the things that we had along our things to do or activities, is to make sure that we are communicating with the local populace. And so when people have a greater understanding, of this technology, and they're being included in the process, it definitely lends towards a more successful outcome. So yes, it is an issue that we would be facing, and we'd be working with the local community to have that be as seamless as possible.
I want to add
Please
something.
do.
To address public questions directly, we do things like conferences, public forums, possibly even educational YouTube videos in order to get the information out there and just kind of educate the public on what we are trying to do and how it will affect them. As for fishermen, we would want to collaborate with them. We understand that this is their livelihood, this is how they make money, this is how they support their families, and we do not want to take that away from them. We want to work with them rather than against them.
Awesome. Y'all sound media trained. What kind of impacts could these have on the ecosystem? In that, was it a hand drawing you had done?
Yes, that was a hand drawing.
As an engineer, love it. Great drawing of a wind turbine as well. So it looks like you're maybe having some kind of growths underneath it. Is that like a good thing, bad thing?
Yes, good thing. There is always concern, to have biomaterial degrading other materials. So further research definitely needs to be done with that. I know there is currently research happening, but I'd be interested to get more information on that. But yes, this is a good thing. Making sure that, underneath it there are, materials that are, not going to be as impacted by, salt water and by, bio growth. But yeah, it's a good thing. And there is, devastation of coral reefs, and so if we're in an area that, has had a loss of habitat, we'd be trying to at least provide, more positive benefits to, the ecology in that local area. So we're looking to have positive benefits there.
Basically, what we want to do underneath this system is kind of create its own little ecosystem in order for the wildlife around to thrive, kind of similar to artificial coral and other projects where you have put materials in the water in order for something to flourish.
Awesome. Super, like a very solar punk type of thing. I really like that. How would you address ocean pollution that could be caused by your product wearing down from wave abrasions?
Definitely. So this is something that has to do with all types of offshore technology. I mean, even from ships to pipes that are underwater. And so we'd make sure to have maintenance teams that are going out to to the sites to make sure and monitor that there aren't materials drifting off. So making sure that we have scheduled maintenance out there. And also having that in mind when designing.
We would also keep a very close eye on this kind of technology because of how corrosive salt water is. We would have to have routine checkups and just make sure that nothing is going wrong.
One final question for you. How would you tackle land access to deploy the generators, and also for like grid connection? Because like, for example, whenever you have off-grid stuff, there's a lot. You have like deep sea cables and such. There's much higher losses due to the polarization of water. So how would you tackle that grid connection?
Definitely. So if we were to be starting tomorrow on something, we would want there to already be some sort of infrastructure in place. And so when looking at, if we're trying to partner this with like an offshore wind farm, I know there are old coal plants. I can specifically talk around like the coastline of Lake Michigan. There are coal plants that are going out of commission, but they already have the infrastructure existing on the coastline to hook up to the energy grid. So we'd be looking to revitalize these types of things, if that answers the question.
And like, just
Yes, please.
curiosity, like, since it's not on land, but
Yeah.
who owns this space in the water that you're using? Is it like government? I know it depends on where you do it, but like, like Michigan, is that like a like under whose jurisdiction does that follow? Is it like a government thing?
It's a government thing, yeah.
It's a government thing. So the government owns the land.
Yep.
You're trying to get a permit.
Permitting, exactly.
Awesome. Anybody else have any questions? No? Well, great job. Awesome. Super good. Cool. Thanks. So, thank you, everyone who participated and attended from here and from Reykjavik University and from Malmö. One second. There we go. Back to present. So congratulations. You all did great. Super proud of all of your work this week and on these projects. I think it goes to show that how much can be accomplished in 1 week. Most of you didn't know each other 6 days ago, and look what you've done. Great job. I'm super proud. And we also encourage you all to use these methods like the Golden Circle and the business model canvas. Again, if there's one takeaway you take from this project, I want you to first start with why are you doing what you're doing. I think that's super important. But yeah, thank you all. Thank you all online. Congratulations. Good job. We're going to give you a couple minutes, and if you can come meet back down here or be ready at like 4, because then we are going to go outside, go out in the woods, get you out. It's a nice day. So, awesome. Good job. Thanks. Give yourselves a round of applause.